In response to the violence, New South Wales Police Minister David Elliott has said that what we saw today was 3,500 very selfish buffheads, people that thought the law didn't apply to them. He also urged them to get tested for the coronavirus, saying there is no doubt in my mind that at least one individual there today had COVID. It is statistically impossible for us to not consider that. I'm appealing to all 3,500 people to get tested tomorrow, if not for themselves, for the sake of their family and friends. Federal Deputy Chief Medical Officer Michael Kidd said that he was very concerned people were not wearing masks or social distancing. He said that when that happens, there is a risk that we'll get a spread of COVID-19. And continued, this is even more imperative during this outbreak with the Delta variant than it was during times last year when we saw similar protests. This puts people's lives at risk, he said. Well, these statements raise the question of whether we will see many cases, hospitalizations, or deaths from this protest. As I detailed in a video last week, and I will extend upon in another video this week, the Delta variant is more contagious than the wild type or original strain of the virus. Given that, if someone at the protest did have the virus, then we can expect to see a large number of cases spring out from it. Hospitalizations and deaths may be a different story. We have noticed that the Delta strain appears to be far less deadly than the original. It also appears that the people who attended the protest today were all young people. This is probably because many of the older people who would have otherwise protested saw the large gathering as a potential event where they could catch the virus and deemed the risks to outweigh the benefits. I assume the same logic probably goes for people with comorbidities, and therefore the majority of the people who were there were likely not at a great risk to the virus. Under this logic, it is entirely likely that choosing the in-person gathering as the form of protest meant that the organizers got less support than they otherwise would have. It also means that the people who attended were all probably at low risk to the virus. Therefore, I expect that there probably will not be as large of a spike in hospitalizations and deaths as many people would be expecting. One of the other issues which has been raised is that those protesters are putting everyone else at risk of getting the virus. This is not necessarily the case, because people would only be at risk if they came into contact with the protesters, and if the protesters had the virus themselves. Given how widespread the denunciation of the protest has been, and how ready people have been to unfriend anyone who attended on social media, and I have seen large numbers of people outright requesting that anyone who attended to unfriend them, I think that most people would avoid coming into contact with the people who attended. So while there may be some spreading of cases from the protesters to other people, I think that it will likewise not be on as large of a scale as people expect. Regardless, if locking down actually worked and there were no subsequent protests, then we would not see any more cases come out of this. Of course, the lockdowns are ineffective, as we've seen both last year and this year. Everyone seems to know this, given how they are saying that the protest is putting people who were not at the protest at risk. But I don't think the people want to accept that, as most people are perfectly happy being in lockdown as long as they think it's going to protect public health.